It's my pleasure to chair this last fireside chat. And as I reflect on these 2 days, we've really quite literally heard the perspective from bench to bedside. We've heard from cutting-edge researchers. We've heard from isotope producers and various points along the supply chain. We heard from Novartis with Celine and I think the CPDC past and present talk about that call to action and that very powerful message of what we need to do to make sure that lutetium PSMA, as one that's currently going through reimbursement, ultimately gets access. And we heard also from clinicians, and then finally a patient himself. So really powerful few days, which takes us to here. Where do we go from here? So I'm going to ask my fireside chatters to come up on the stage and have a seat. I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves because I was going to make them squirm and read their bios, but we realized that actually would probably take half the session to read through all of their accomplishments. But suffice it to say, this esteemed panel here really sit at the intersection of ideas and innovation and investment. So with that, perhaps you could each say a few words about yourself and introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is François Bénard. I'm the Vice President Research for BC Cancer. I'm also a nuclear medicine physician and a clinician scientist. I work at UBC as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brad Waters. I'm the Executive Vice President of Science and Research at University Health Network, UHN, here in Toronto, and a Senior Scientist at the Princess Margaret Cancer Centre.
Hi, I'm John Bookout. I'm a nuclear medicine physician from Thunder Bay, which is, for those of you who don't know, about 17 hours that way by road. I'm also the Ontario Health Regional Cancer Imaging Lead for Northwestern Ontario and the Vice Chair of the OMA section on nuclear medicine. And I'm here on behalf of the Canadian Association of Nuclear Medicine.
Hi, I'm Mary Gospodarich. I'm a radiation oncologist from Princess Margaret Cancer Centre, and I'm here because Rebecca asked me to be.
Catherine Hayashi, I'm the CEO at Triumph Innovations, which is the commercialization arm for Triumph, Canada's Particle Centre, and I'm the co-lead for the Canadian Medical Isotope Ecosystem.
Wonderful, thanks everyone. So let's get into it. First question, what does Canada need to drive the success of radiotheranostics from a collaboration standpoint? So more specifically, how can we pursue a collaborative but still competitive framework? So Brad, can you take that first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. I think it's certainly an important one, and I think it's important for us as a country, as groups that interested in the future success of theranostics, to help define really what our ambition is and what we think success looks like. I think we need to look at this, from the framework of patients that can benefit from radioisotopes and radiotheranostics, recognizing that it is a new field. It is a different kind of therapy, it's a different type of medical procedure, and there's potential, and in many instances where this has been implemented, it's been in a fragmented approach. I think if we look at the experience that patients will go through and participate in, it means wrapping excellence around the patient in all the places where that comes from. And it does take a partnership. Experts in nuclear medicine, experts in radiation oncology, in medical oncology, in clinical research, and also in basic science and translational and clinical research. And we have built many kinds of those expertise, but often sitting in somewhat separate domains. And I think we have a great opportunity here. We've seen the value of doing this in other instances to wrap that expertise around the experience of the patient and really design a future approach to therapy, and doing that in the context of engaging patients in what they think that looks like. But separate from that, I also think it's important for us to set an ambition for Canada to lead in this industry. We've heard throughout these last 2 days around the potential to do that. Unique capabilities in Canada around radioisotope production and really global leading industry and potential there. We also have a very rich experience in Canada in many of the other areas that are going to take to make this successful. in the application and treatment in patients. We have 130 years of experience in imaging and in delivery of radiation for the therapy of cancer. These were both discovered, the discovery of X-rays launched both of those fields in 1895. And we've developed enormous expertise and understanding around the complexities of the imaging and the understanding of images, but also in the delivery of radiotherapy, the importance of understanding dose, of involving physics and physicists, the way and timing under which that radiation is delivered, and importantly, the underlying biology that determines success and failure, toxicity, and treatment response. And we need to factor in all of that understanding and that expertise to take this new discipline, this new therapy, this new opportunity, and really to help realize its potential. So I think Canada should, raise its hand and say it's going to lead the world in this, make the commitments that are going to be necessary in research, in development, in innovation, in bringing those groups together, and in the discovery of potentially new radiotheranostics and new isotopes and the individual characteristics around all of those. So it's an exciting area. I think Canada is well positioned to do this with amazing facilities in BC and Alberta and here in Ontario and elsewhere. But I do think it means putting a flag in the ground and really calling out the opportunity that is presenting itself to us now.
Great, thanks. And at UHN specifically, can you speak a bit about the sort of patient-focused Radiotheranostics Center that you're...
Yeah, so we've made a commitment to develop a new Radiotheranostics Center, which will be the center where patients receive treatment, and will bring the expertise that I talked about to be part of it. Our colleagues and experts in nuclear medicine, in medical imaging, in clinical research, in medical oncology, in radiation oncology, will all be part of that center. And underpinning it will be a commitment to research, to discovery research, biological research, and clinical research that can bring these therapies to patients early, which can optimize their use and their potential. And that will take some infrastructure, will take some new physical space. It'll take the machines that are necessary to be part of that. But I think the bigger commitment is actually the collaborative framework under which it represents.
Yeah, wonderful. I know from having set up a lot of radium programs, having them go from, even at UHN, the Cancer Center over to nuclear medicine in Toronto General, going around to different specialists, having that sort of one-stop shop with the patient at the center is fantastic. Does anyone else on the panel want to add to this discussion?
Yeah, just to expand it a little bit, I think it's very good to position Canada as a leader, but I think to do that, we need to develop a sort of a mission to explore the potential of radiotheranostics to help patients. And at the beginning, it's cancer patients, maybe the other patients. I think in the room today, everybody who needs to be involved is in the room. It's a very unique meeting that combines industry, that combines pharma, combines nuclear industry, combines all the medical specialists, physicists, radiopharmacists, and others that are necessary to be. Mariana Mazzucato is a British economist who put forward the concept of mission economy. And she gives an example of US deciding in the 60s to go to the moon and putting all the resources to achieve the mission. And I think if we want to focus on the mission to define the potential benefit of these technologies for patients, we can bring the right people to the table and to make it happen, and then gradually, one by one, remove the barriers. Look, there was a lot of discussion about barriers. There are financial barriers, there are policy barriers, there's all kinds of regulation, but if we can decide that that's where we're going, we can gradually remove the barriers one by one and get there.
I love that. Thank you. So let's move on. Next question, which I'll direct to Jonathan, is how does the future of radiotheranostics, access differ across regions?
Yeah. So I am not a theranostics expert. I am a simple country nuclear medicine physician. But I am an important part of this process because I'm what the supply chain people would call the last mile. You can do all this development, but somehow the stuff has to get through me in my little country department to get into a patient. So you do need to engage the regions in this. One of the comments that I was struck by yesterday morning was someone said, think who has not been affected and had to spend a night or two in one of these hospitals on University Avenue? And the correct answer, of course, is most people. Almost everyone in the province has not been to a hospital on University Avenue. Even in the GTA, the majority of healthcare is not provided on University Avenue. Healthcare happens out in the regions. So we need to come up with a plan that will get these wonderful products into community hospitals, into all of our regional cancer centers, because it's not realistic to have, it doesn't improve equity if you just have this available in London, Ottawa, and Toronto. I'll tell you about, Thunder Bay is really the only nuclear medicine department in an area the size of France. We have 400,000 people. I'll tell you about George. George is a fictional person, but he's very much representative of our region. George is 76 years old. He's from Sandy Lake. He's Indigenous, may have been a residential school survivor, speaks no English, and he has to take either an ice road or a bearskin airlines, let the bear take you there, to Sioux Lookout, to catch a plane, to fly 2 more hours to Thunder Bay, and then fly 2 hours to Toronto. And he doesn't speak English. He's never been to the big city. This place is overwhelming. This guy is not going to come down here to get therapy. We've had patients in Thunder Bay who wouldn't fly 2 hours just to get the PSMA scan, and they're coming from the city. And it's not just these people from the remote north. My dad lives 3 hours down the 401 that way. If I said to him, you need to come to Toronto to get theranostics, he would say, no, I'm going to go to our local hospital and get my chemo there instead. I don't care if the theranostics is a little bit better. Because he's 76 years old. This city is overwhelming. He hates the traffic, he hates the noise, he hates the chaos, he can't find his way around here. And that's typical of our prostate cancer population, right? So you cannot set up a system that involves elderly people who may have some cognitive impairment, who may have financial issues, involving them coming down to a big city and getting treated. So we need to roll this out in the periphery. And there's 2 reasons. One is the health equity issue. Our urology group has data, I don't know if it's been published yet, that shows that your outcomes with prostate cancer are directly correlated to your distance from the cancer center in Thunder Bay, in our region. The farther you go, the worse your outcomes are. Patients in the north present with more advanced disease because it's harder to access primary care. So there's a health equity component to this, but there's also a profit component for those of you in the industry. I mean, we can talk about 250,000 doses of Pluvicto projected, but if you don't plan for the fact that you have to get that to the communities, you're not going to get those doses into patients, because the patients are not going to. There will be a chunk of those patients, 50,000 of them, who will just say, no, I don't want to go unless I can go to my local cancer center. So there is a reason beyond health equity. If you want to realize the plan you have made, if you're 3Ping all over the place here, you want to get your product into people, you need to come up with a system to distribute it to the periphery. And there are a lot of challenges in doing that. This stuff has to be flown to Thunder Bay. We used to get our FDG from Hamilton or Toronto, and it would be flown 2 hours up on Air Canada. Now, if the pilot is afraid of radiation, he or she can say no to having that on the plane. If there's a pet in the cargo hold, they will bump your FDG. If there's too much luggage, they will bump your FDG. So there are all these sort of logistical issues with the airlines where you have to. This is where we need the help of industry and more powerful people to say, look, this has to be a priority. The cat stays in Toronto until the next flight because these cancer patients need their isotope. So there's those sorts of challenges. There's the challenges of getting the patients down 9 hours from Attawapiskat to the cancer center to get their PET scan. So there's a lot of issues with that. There's issues around the staffing. Everyone is short of nuclear medicine technologists. If you can't find nuclear medicine technologists at Sick Kids or Princess Margaret, what are the chances of finding them in Owen Sound or Timmins or Thunder Bay? So there are a lot of very difficult things, and then there's some logistical things as well. You can treat people as an outpatient in Toronto and say, drive 20 minutes and go home. But if someone has to take a bus and a plane and then an ice road to get home, those people probably have to be treated as inpatients in Thunder Bay. You can't just sort of send them on a 14-hour, multimodality excursion to get home, right? So there are a lot of challenges in the region, but we have to come up with these things if we want to actually get the treatments into patients and provide access to the entire population. Because it's a treatment that is only available in urban settings is not equitable. You know, it's better than nothing, but it's really not equitable.
Right, thank you for sharing that. Any additional thoughts?
I think we have similar issues in BC, of course, so the advantage of having a provincial control system is you have to think about everybody getting access. And the challenges are quite significant from the shipping as well. Even if you establish tiers of service, it's not going to be just prostate cancer, there'll be rare diseases, complex disease, leukemias, and so on, eventually where radiopharmaceutical therapy is advancing. You have to think about patient access. If they can't get it delivered locally, how are you going to get the patient safely in the area of the hospital? Can you make that experience never enjoyable, but at least not as daunting as what Jonathan's reflecting? So we've added, for example, Indigenous navigators. The BC government has invested quite a bit on patient transportation to help them, because even if we have cancer centers in the regions, the patients can still be quite far. And getting a PET scan, it can be quite daunting. When we know from our statistics that people who live in rural areas do not tend to take advantage, even if the test is prescribed, may not go because of all the issues that Jonathan eloquently put forward. So it's an important issue to address.
Absolutely, and I had many conversations like that with colleagues of yours in Prince George, so thank you. So moving on, what are the opportunities for industry and academia to increase cross-communication to work together to provide better access to radiopharmaceuticals and streamline processes across provincial borders? So Francois, can you take a crack at this first?
Yeah, I think there are two questions and two separate issues. One is collaboration with academia, and I think one of the best ways is through clinical trials, right? Canada's always been very strong in running oncology clinical trials with high-performing sites. And we've seen it in the radiopharmaceutical trials that have been run by Big Pharma across multiple centers in Canada. There's been high enrollment. Many of our centers, or flagship centers at least, have had access to, been able to participate in those trials. We have the example of the PR21 trial, which is run by the Canadian Cancer Trials Group, which has been also, Novartis invested and carried the cost of the drugs and has helped done. This is a randomized trial comparing chemotherapy with docetaxel with radiopharmaceutical therapy with Pluvicto. And I think the clinical trials have a lot of advantages because it brings visibility to the pharma industry to who their customers are. It also helps form the hospital system and inform of what they need to do when it becomes standard of care. It's a way of kind of preparing the hospitals to a state of readiness. Of course, these trials are given in a highly secure environment with a lot of support with the full-blown clinical trial unit. But what this has highlighted, for example, is the weakness of our nuclear medicine infrastructure to deliver those trials, to coordinate the logistics, to plan the infusions, to what to do in case the shipment's not delivered. And it adds up to a level of coordination if you've got multiple patients to monitor and follow, and these doses come in every 6 weeks, and then the dose gets canceled, and how do you reorganize all that? The departments are under-resourced because the whole Canadian healthcare system has been designed with no excess capacity, and we've seen it during COVID. So trials are a really good way to work and collaborate. It brings early visibility to the products and helps prepare the health system. In terms of interprovincial coordination, I think there's either the glass half empty or the glass half full. We have the Canadian Association of Provincial Cancer Agencies that works very well together. There's a unified evaluation for health technology assessment with CADIT. The provinces have ganged together, with the exception of Quebec, which has INES, but they collaborate closely between CADIT and INES for drug pricing negotiations. I know pharmaceutical industry doesn't like it because it gives a lot of leverage, but it also streamlines the process to some extent. It is too slow because it takes up to 2 years sometimes for new drugs to be approved after Health Canada approves them, but it still is at least a pan-Canadian coordination that ensures more uniformity across the province. But as Ms. Damov also indicated, healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction in this country, And every province has different issues they have to deal with. Some might have more severe manpower shortages, others might have more significant budget issues. And rightfully so, it's decentralized to the needs of each provinces. But we have a lot of initiatives working together, from investigator-initiated pan-Canadian trials. We have a big grant, $24 million, that we have partners from BC to Quebec working together on R&D and early phase clinical trials and supporting research and collaborative research. So there's many initiatives that can be done, and we bring in industry partners in our advisory board so they have visibility on what we do, and we can get input on what industry needs, because ultimately if you want to take things from the lab to the patient, you need the investments that only industry can provide. Governments will never be able to invest the massive amounts of money that are required to take something from the bench completely. We can take it from bench to bedside, but to bench side to an approved product, that's out of the scale of academia. And these are some of the intersection points where we can do, already have ongoing activities, and I think it will continue growing as the field matures.
Wonderful. Thank you. And
Maybe I'll follow on exactly from where Francois was leaving off. I've been working in the life sciences startup company space for over 20 years, and you can often get to some early clinical trial data, but there is always what we call the valley of death, where you have a really interesting idea, but you don't have the funds to get it to a proof of concept stage. And it's traditionally, we're looking at government grants through CIHR and other funding agencies, which take a lot of time. So I think, how do we make that faster? And so part of what we designed as our contribution to the solution for the Canadian medical isotope ecosystem was our development fund. So it's a $5 million fund, and part of it was designed to help these researchers and startup companies find funding. So when you go through the program, successful technologies are given basically a funding letter, and so they don't have to have their matching funding secured when they come into the program with their proposal. You can take your $500,000 award and take it to an angel investor, take it to a seed investor, and say, okay, I've got $500,000 in matching from the CMIE. If you put in $500,000, we've got $1 million to get to our animal model or to our next proof of concept. So I think finding really creative ways to incent people and bring people together to share their risks, to push those things forward, is something that we're all kind of striving for all the time. The old ways, they do take a long time, and they do take a lot of money. So how do we help people advance those technologies as quickly as we can? It's a very fast-moving sector. Having an extra year or two in development can mean that you sort of missed your window for funding, for impact, that more competition is succeeding in that space. And I guess I would just like to remind almost myself, when I started this project in 2017, I went to go talk to a lot of the life sciences venture investors in Canada and was talking about the promise of these new radiotherapeutics, and all of them were like, what is that? And to see those same investors investing in Alpha-9, investing in later stage rounds, it's really exciting, but it's moved very quickly, and it's going to continue to move quickly. So I think we kind of have a window to find ways to work together to push Canadian technologies faster and more forward.
right.
Yeah, I think it's important to also, to your point, to reflect on the current availability of radioisotopes that are now in the clinic. All started in academia, and actually were pursued for many years in that space. And it's unlike most of the other therapeutics that we have on the market now that were really developed in large pharma. So there's a strong history of that here. It's been driven by, academia and clinician scientists that have seen the opportunity, that started the early phase trials, but it's had a huge injection of potential here because of the involvement of large pharma that can now come in, run the large phase 3 trials, go through the regulatory processes, help build a manufacturing capability and the ability to deliver this for patients. So that, with this sort of change that's happened over the last 5 years. We're in a position now to really nurture that strong partnership between academia and industry, both on the discovery side and the translation of that, and also, as Francois said, on being a great partner to run those trials and to influence how they're done, so that they're done in a way that has the biggest potential to have impact.
Thank you. And I can say, coming from 24 years in pharma, the level of collaboration that I experienced working in this space is unlike anything I've ever experienced in other disease areas and platforms. Okay, so moving on, because the time is going by and we have so much to discuss. Mary, I'll direct this question to you. What does it take for the radiotheranostics community to rise above the traditional discipline silos to support growth and innovation? So that's part one. And how do we make sure people outside the radiotheranostics community are aware of the benefits and would support and embrace its growth and development?
So I always say that cancer is a team sport. It takes many, many participants to have a comprehensive program for early detection, screening, prevention, diagnosis, and good treatment of cancer. Having said that, the disciplines and the professions that are engaged in that were created before that collaboration happened. And so there are disciplinary silos that for various reasons feel that collaboration threatens their identity. And our, financing systems and incentives don't really help this situation. And I think it was Harry Truman who said, it is amazing what one can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. And so, if you think about having a team of professionals, and the only issue is who has the competence that's necessary to help this patient to contribute. And I think radiotheranostics is very interesting because it combines so many disciplines. So it's almost like a natural laboratory of how to develop new interprofessional, multidisciplinary teams that work together with a single mission and not worried about who gets the credit, but worried how you accelerate the progress, how do you develop evidence, how do you get funding for taking the product to the clinic, and sort of single goal and develop competencies that all come together. As far as going outside is, I work a lot in global cancer and global health. And in cancer, we understand each other. We know what the problem is, we know what to do. We complain that there's not enough funding, there's not enough people, there's not enough whatever. But when you go outside, people actually don't know. We've just completed a sort of ethnographic interviews of some of the global health leaders and asking them, what are the opportunities in cancer control? And they said prevention, HPV vaccination, because treatment doesn't work. And you go, what? The survival of cancer patients has doubled in the last 30 to 40 years. Now most people survive. There's lots we can do. And people don't know about it. So we have nice conference. Everybody in the room is involved in one way or another in radiotheranostics. And I think the next conference should bring people who don't know anything about it so they can learn about the potential. Because sometimes when you just discuss it in the group who is in the know, we all understand each other. We know what needs to be done, but nobody outside knows about it. And it's impossible to get support once you get outside of this community.
True. Thank you for that. So next question I'm going to direct to Catherine. I know you've touched on this already, but can you describe the CIF investment to the CMIE as an example of federal support to the radiopharm industry to encourage investment, drive commercialization efforts, and encourage new collaboration?
Yeah, and I think it was a really fascinating kind of program that came about. The government announced these strategic innovation funds, and I actually thought, maybe we could use it to make actinium, was my initial thought. And I had a visit from James Sconiac from Bruce Power, who was very interested in funding the lutetium project. We then ended up talking to CPDC. Joe McCann was the CEO at that point. And so we decided that we needed to come together and not have competing proposals that were along the same lines. And it came together quite readily, and I think it speaks to what you were talking about. There are very strong relationships that go back a long ways between people in this sector, and then going to government to explain the need for innovative new medical isotopes. So we wanted to focus on what we felt were the emerging ones: actinium, lutetium, gallium, isotopes that we thought were going to be in short supply and were going to be very important for the future of the sector. So I think after a lot of education and lobbying to try to explain to people that had never heard of these things, why radioisotopes are important, why this was going to offer new hope to patients, why this was going to be new business opportunities, why this was going to be important for First Nations reconciliation. The government did step in and provide funding, and then I think that awareness starts to build. So after we got funded, the New Frontiers Research Fund was also announced. We managed to finish getting our new Institute for Advanced Medical Isotopes building, which we've built in partnership with Francois on the Triumph site, and that attracted significant funding from the provincial government in BC. There was contributions from the BC Cancer Foundation to make that building happen. So I think this working together and pulling the parties together, government, academia, and industry, to really advance the technology that we need. We got critical investment from Fusion Pharmaceuticals. BWXT has been an excellent partner in helping us get the scale-up done and isotope to researchers and patients. So it really is, but with all of those little pieces, we're catalyzed by this government program, and then all of a sudden the momentum builds, and it starts to feel like this could be a real anchor in the world for Canada.
Wonderful. And it sounds like we could talk the rest of the session on this topic, and maybe instead, with all the experience that you've shared, those of you that are interested in the fund and sort of advice on how to navigate it should reach out to Catherine for sure. But continuing on this theme of funding, Mary, can you talk more about the novel funding streams, the societies, research groups that emphasize cross-discipline research, clinical delivery, training, etc.? Talk more about novel funding streams, societies, research groups that emphasize the cross-discipline research.
So partnerships are very important. What you talked about, Sir George Haldane refers to as triple helix of innovation. Get the partnerships between industry, government, and academia, and it can be very, very powerful. And I think that one thing that I would like to add is we don't need to do it alone. I agree with Brad that Canada can take a leadership position, but a number of issues that we face, which is hugely distributed population, the diversity of the population, the geography, those issues exist elsewhere. So as far as population density in small islands in Caribbean will never have a big cancer institute, right? Mm-hmm. They face the same challenges. There are indigenous populations in New Zealand and Australia, they face exactly the same challenges we do. And so while we have all these challenges, we can also look for opportunities to collaborate globally to address the same issues that face us, looking at the partners probably in similar health systems, publicly funded health systems by and large, which are all struggling at the present time. But those challenges also form opportunities, and you can then get funding through the multilateral, international, global collaborations, and therefore bring new resources and answer the questions that we have faster. Because if we want to do it all alone, Canada is still a relatively small country. If we partner, we can do it faster. The best example in clinical research is probably what was done in childhood cancer, where childhood cancer are very rare diseases and no country alone can answer all the questions, but there's very strong global collaboration amongst the pediatric oncologists, and they can actually do prospective randomized trial and answer questions much faster than if they worked alone. So I think we can learn from other areas of medicine or cancer how we can address our challenges.
Definitely. So collaboration is key. Okay, we're going to move on and talk about how can industry and hospitals prepare for that. I've heard tsunami of demand coming for emerging theranostics within the hospital setting and from a supply chain perspective. And how can the different care centers work maybe in the academic centers with the more regional centers to ensure treatments are delivered in those major cities as well as in the periphery. So I'm going to start with Brad and then Jonathan.
Yeah, well, it's been touched on, and it is a really important and a big issue and a tough problem. It hasn't been solved in other areas where we require unique technologies or highly specialized infrastructure in order to deliver those kinds of therapies. And as Jonathan pointed out, it's really important for us to think through this from the start so that we can deliver and develop therapeutic approaches that all Canadians really can benefit from. I think there is a mutual interest in doing that between industry and in the medical community. There should be opportunities to sort of think through that, and particularly for radioisotopes that have the unique properties around the importance of distribution and timing and thinking through the delivery processes for that. There's a financial incentive to do that correctly. There's a super strong medical and health incentive to do that correctly. So, as Mary's talked about, this entire field does require a cooperative approach, a partnered approach to think through the best ways to do that. I don't have all the answers yet, and I think it's something that we don't have the answers yet to. And, the examples that Jonathan gave in the beginning are really tough problems that we need to think through how to solve. One of the things that the clinical trial community is really concerned with right now, this is true across all of North America, is how to diversify the kinds of participants that take part in clinical trials. And for many years, those trials have been delivered in very, very large academic centers that often have very unique and not very diverse populations. That's less true in Toronto, which has a bit of a microcosm of the world, but it's certainly true in many other aspects. And it also leaves out a large group of patients that can benefit from participating in clinical trials. And one of the efforts underway is to think through new approaches to what are called distributed clinical trials, where patients can participate in trials in their home centers without traveling into a specialized cancer center. And there's certainly an opportunity to think through not only when we have approved medicines, but how to extend that opportunity, that diversity and the equity earlier in the process and into the clinical trial setting.
Wonderful. And Jonathan, maybe you can add from a peripheral perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything he said. I think, again, collaboration is really important here. I mean, you're never going to put a big biotech development center in Thunder Bay. That needs to be in a bigger city. So development can happen centrally, but we need a process to deliver peripherally, because that's where the patients are. So it struck me at this symposium that we've really got two different problems going on. There's the whole isotope production industry and all of that apparatus, and I'm very impressed. I mean, the potential for all of that side of things is amazing. I'm just floored by it. And then we get to the clinical side, and I go, well, that'll be great for selling stuff to the States. How are we actually going to, give that to Canadian patients? That's a separate challenge from the development side of things. I think getting it to our population in particular is going to be a bit difficult. The one advantage we do have in Canada is that this is a publicly funded, centralized healthcare system. So, we have We have a cancer center in Thunder Bay, which is very similar to the one, a little smaller than the one at Princess Margaret, but we have oncologists who trained in Toronto and Halifax, all over the place, and they're held to the same standards, that they're supposed to offer the same treatments. And because we don't have the variability that, say, the US would have, we do have the opportunity and some of that infrastructure in all of the different regional cancer centers to get people involved in some of these in some of these distributed clinical trials. So I think particularly with when I think of my younger oncologists, they've come out of training programs in the big centers. They have a hunger for still being academic and still participating in things. And if you reach out to them, they will absolutely participate.
Thank you. So I know, Mary, you, I think, wanted to jump in. I just want to let everyone know we're in our last 3 minutes. So if there's a very strong opinion, go for it. But we have one more question. I just want to give Catherine and Francois time to answer. So how will increased collaboration across industry and healthcare attract more investment from Canadian companies and anchor our companies in Canada? And I know there was some discussion on whether that's feasible, but would like to hear your perspective on how we can do this and prevent loss of companies to the U.S. So maybe Catherine first, and then Francois, and maybe about a minute each. I know that's...
Maybe I'll just quickly make a point about, I talked a little bit about momentum, and we talk about anchor companies, but I think we need you need that critical mass of a cluster. If you're trying to attract people and talent, you need to have, so if it doesn't work out with your job, they need to be able to think, I can get another job. So it's still a good idea to move to Canada. It's still a good idea to move to Vancouver or Toronto. And so I think, how do we get more companies to build that critical mass? So maybe I'll let Francois talk more specifically, perhaps about your experience.
I totally agree. I think clusters are important, and you see where the Canadian radiopharmaceutical startups came from. It's around the McMaster expertise as well as around the Triumph BC Cancer and UBC expertise. So in Vancouver, there's 7 cyclotrons. It's the Mecca of radiochemistry. There's radiochemistry expertise at UBC, Simon Fraser University, BC Cancer, and Triumph. And most of us are working together, and we're training a lot of people. And that brings capacity, skilled jobs, and it helps when the companies open up. They have a pool of trainees who graduate, postdocs, who are willing to transition in a new career, and that's helped really foster potential for growth in this area. And the companies will stay where the expertise is, right? So we were talking about the American venture capital, where the big money is. It's actually international. There's companies from Switzerland and so on who are investing in Canada as well. But they really don't worry so much where the company is located. They want the offices to be where the expertise is. And the reason they open up offices in the Bay Area and Boston, for example, is because they have a pool of experienced chief medical officers, clinical development folks. So the office areas, they have a large pool of talent because there's a longer history around the Boston area in particular of track record of startups and companies and so on. So Canada is growing, but we're not quite where they are yet. But the isotope expertise we have, and they don't. So they will keep company research and R&D labs, and it will be a cross-border thing because they want access to the enterprise. They're really not nationalists about where the companies is located. They want to build products, build companies of scale, and sell those products to the world.
Wonderful. And I guess that really speaks to the optimism we should all have when it comes to radiotheranostics in Canada. And I think I'm going to borrow from TELUS and say, the future of radiotheranostics here is friendly, not without its challenges. But I really, to close, really loved, Mary, sort of the analogy that you gave with that mission to the moon. We have so much talent and expertise in this room and in the country. And if we just really define that mission and focus on that and the benefit that Canadians derive, we can all work together collaboratively to remove any barriers that stand in our way. So thanks to the panel for this great discussion.